Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our latest webinar at Forvis Mazars, and I'm pleased to be here talking to you this morning. My name is Charles Allen, and I'm going to share my screen in a moment and introduce Sarah, who's going to take us through the introduction, and then you'll get to hear me again and as we go through the rest of the webinar. So thank you for coming to this webinar today. And we will get started here in just a second. Let me see if I can share my screen. And here we go.
Thank you, Charles. And thank you to our audience for attending today's webinar, Streamlining Reporting and Planning for Dynamics 365 Finance with Solver. A little about Forvis Mazars. We are an independent member of Forvis Mazars Global, a leading global professional services network. Ranked among the largest public accounting firms in the U.S., our team members are dedicated to providing an unmatched client experience through the delivery of assurance, tax, and consulting services. As part of the firm's consulting services, Business Technology Services provides analysis, design, implementation, upgrade, training, and support services for accounting and ERP systems, sales and marketing CRM systems, and our end-to-end solutions can help clients achieve their digital transformation goals. At a glance, these are the technologies Business Technology Services supports. Today, we'll be focusing on the Solver xFP&A solution and Dynamics 365 Finance ERP. Our presenter today is Charles Allen. Charles is a senior manager at Forvis Mazars and has more than 30 years of experience. In his experience, Charles has worked with a variety of industries and solutions. He implements, trains, and supports analytical reporting and planning solutions, including Solver, SQL Server reporting services, and Power BI. As a frequent contributor and speaker, Charles can be found on Forvis Mazars Foresights, LinkedIn, and at conferences such as Solver Ascend and Dynamics Communities. Again, thank you for participating in today's webinar. Now I will turn it back over to Charles.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. And again, thanks to everybody that's here. I do want to call out, I do see some names that I recognize and even somebody from Ole Miss, from which I have an MBA a few years ago. Many years ago, but we've got folks from all over the U.S. here and actually out of country as well. So thank you again for joining, and let's get started. Let's talk about reporting and planning. All right, so here is our "Why Are We Here" slide. So we're going to talk about Solver's reporting functionality and how it can be used with data from both D365 and other systems. A lot of companies have multiple companies, and some of those companies may have data in other systems, or you may want to have data that's not being housed in D365, such as payroll or billing systems or other types of systems. So we'll talk about how you can use it with those. We'll talk about the planning functionality. So a lot of D365 users like to use, for example, Power BI for a lot of their reporting, but you still need to create budgets and forecasts. So we'll talk about how you can use Solver to handle that functionality. And then last but not least, we'll talk about Power BI and how that can be used with Solver to show you and help you build reports with that. All right. So here is our agenda for today. It's a very short agenda, but a lot of material within each part. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of tell you who Solver is or what Solver is, so you know what you're here to learn. And then we'll go into reporting and planning. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, there is a Q&A box where you can post your questions. Please do so. And if you have any just random thoughts you want to get off, you put them in that Q&A window as well. So we're here to make this interesting for you. And if there's something that you want to know, by all means, please let us know what it is so we can get it answered. All right. So what is the solver xFP&A solution? You may have heard of FP&A. Most people here are probably familiar with FP&A. But the question is, what is this xFP&A? Well, X stands for extended, everything. So what kind of data do you want to report or create plans for? And that's the X. Could be sales, could be payroll, could be financial data, anything. So it's not just finance. It could be across the organization. All right. So here we go. Now, there are a few of you who are here because you would like to get some CPE credit. And so we have 4 polling questions, and the first one is coming up right now. So here we go. What brings you to today's webinar? So take a moment to answer that question, and we will keep on going. So there are a few of you here, a lot of you, in fact, are not using Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance, and that's perfectly good. You may be considering it, or you just want to learn about Solver, or you just may love to hear the sound of my voice. So whatever your reason is, go ahead and choose one of those options. There's no wrong answer, and we'll keep on going.
I choose A and the sound of your voice.
So we do have, it's hard to believe, 7 days from today is Halloween. So hopefully everybody here who enjoys a lot of candy is gearing up for that and not eating all the stuff that was pre-bought for the holiday on your own. But that's very easy to do. All right, so it looks like we have our answer. And 60% chose option B. They want to learn about reporting and planning. Well, that's perfect because that's what we're here to do. So what is Solver? Well, it's a lot of things, of course. First is it is a Microsoft Azure-based solution that is hosted by Solver on the Microsoft Azure Cloud platform. So some of you who may be using Azure already, you may have some Azure consumption requirements, and Solver can help you fulfill those requirements. But it is a product that it's created by and published by and maintained by Solver Inc. And Solver is the name of the product, just to make things easier. Okay, so it's Azure SQL based. It uses Excel for template design, and we'll get into that as we go through the webinar. But the idea is just about everybody here, unless you're using something like Lotus 123 or Quattro Pro, is probably using Excel. Some of you may be using Google Sheets, but this product uses Excel with an add-in to build templates. The idea is that Excel provides formulas and formatting. So if I want to sum up data, I want to add data, subtract data, multiply data, that's all done using Excel functions. The format of the report or the planning template, that's done using Excel. The data, of course, comes from Solver. It's going to use a data warehouse that is Azure SQL based to supply the data for those templates. Okay. As I just said, there is a data warehouse. Now, this data warehouse is intended for people who need their data. Now, a lot of people, for example, if you're using D365 or other systems, you may be using something like OneLake, or you may have some other data warehouse. So you might consider Solver in this case more of a data mart, which is being used for specific purposes to provide reports and planning templates, okay? But the idea is You take the data from whatever sources you have, you put them into Solver so that you can use Solver for reporting and planning. Okay? And of course, as we said, reporting and planning is part of this. There are reports that you can build as far as templates. There are also a number of pre-built templates that you can get from Solver to get you started. And there are also pre-built planning templates you can use, as well as, of course, building your own. And the last thing is inclusive pricing. So a lot of people say, oh, great. Well, what does it cost? Well, of course, it depends on how many users you have and some other variables, but it's very simple pricing. And there's basically a what they call the Solver suite, which is kind of the foundation layer. And then you have full users and you have viewers, people who can only view shared report results. Okay, so you have full users who can do anything, assuming they have the permissions to do it, and then they have viewers who are only here to view what's been shared with them. Okay, and we'll see more about that as we go. So I'm not going to read all these slides, but you can see we've got a few points here. So who can use Solver? Well, first of all, if you want to combine ERP data with other types of data, or maybe you have ERP data in different sources. We've had clients like that, where they have some data in QuickBooks, they have data in an accounting system, a different accounting system, and they want to combine it all for reporting. Okay. Another thing is if you're multi-entity and maybe you need financial consolidations or eliminations or currency conversions. So Solver has the ability to handle those three big items: consolidations, eliminations, and currency conversion. If you want to have budgeting and forecasting beyond the GL level, Solver can be a really good tool for that. And as we'll see when we look at the budget templates, you can build really anything you want. You can build personnel budgets, capital expenditure, sales, of course, expense budgeting as well, but really any type of template you want to create, because you're using Excel. And the only difference is instead of the data being in a spreadsheet, the data is coming from the data warehouse. And if a lot of you may be using large spreadsheet models today where you download trial balances and you connect them together and then you have multiple sheets that are linked to the data. Well, if you want to get away from that type of a process, that's where Solver can help. Okay? I've had at least a couple of clients who refer to their spreadsheet models as the beast. And so if you want to tame the beast and have something that's more structured, then that's what we have here.
Charles, before you move away from this slide, we have some relevant questions from Jack and Pamela.
Yeah, so I'll answer this last, or do this last point, and then we'll take a look at those questions. And then last thing is modeling scenarios. So if you want to have different what ifs or predictive planning, things like that, allocations, Solver can help you do that as well. All right, so Pamela, she said, can you load data from a simple accounting system like QuickBooks Pro Online? And yes, Pamela, there is actually a connector within Solver. Let me get the right word. There is a connector for QuickBooks Online within Solver. Okay, so you can definitely do that. And Jack says, does Solver work with financial insights? And Jack, I don't know the answer off the top of my head because I don't know financial insights. So I'll check on that and I will answer that for you later. Okay, so let's kind of visualize what this whole thing looks like. As I said, we have a data warehouse in Solver. And you can see here that that data warehouse can be fed by various sources, okay? And then on top of that warehouse, you have reporting, you have planning, and you have dashboards. Now the dashboards can be created in Excel, just like you might do today, or you can use something like Power BI or Tableau, okay? So any of those three choices, we have some clients, for example, who like to send out snapshot reports, and then you can build Excel graphics in your reports along with the tabular data, let's say. But if you want the pure Power BI experience, then that's where the dashboards or the full dashboard experience, you can use Power BI and you can use Tableau. All right. So great. So let's go ahead and move on. Now, for those of you who are using D365 Finance and Operations, here are some ways that you can connect to that data or get that data. So one is, a lot of you may be switching over to OneLake, and you can see there is a connector coming this fall. So if you're interested in that, I will be happy to get you more details about that. Azure Data Lake, BYOD, which is bring your own database, and OData. So there are four different options for connecting to D365 Finance and Operations, or Finance and Supply Chain. Okay. So if you are using D365, by all means, let us know, and we can get you some good information about how that works. Okay. But generally speaking, it uses a SQL connector if you're going to use this Azure Data Lake. And then if you're using BYOD, which is bring your own database, then a lot of people are using still, they're putting it into SQL, an Azure SQL database. And then OData, which if you are not processing a lot of data, but you are using the D365 Finance, then OData can work well. And we do have client using that. And there are other clients, of course, of Solver doing that. All right. So now the moment you've all come to see is creating reports. So let's take a look at that. So, hey, we have a polling question. How do you today create reports? So let's take a moment to look at that and answer that question. So a lot of you probably have heard of FRX. And then there's also Management Reporter, which replaced FRX. So some of you may know about that. Okay. I have have a feeling of, goodness, I get all choked up about this. A lot of you probably export data to Excel and then do things in Excel. But anyway, go ahead and take an answer or take a shot at an answer, and then we'll see what everybody says.
And then on that note, Charles, and for our audience members, in that related content, the resources box, we have a recent article that explains a little bit more about financial planning with Solver xFP&A, and Charles, your Solver Power BI Manager Reporter and FRX article, along with a few other helpful materials in there. Cool beans.
All right, so let's see. Looks like we have an answer, and 60+% are saying export to Excel. All right. So I'm not going to read this slide, but basically, if you guys are doing a lot of Excel work and you want to get rid of that Excel work, then this little guy here with the cape can possibly help you. And basically, we create these formatted reports, and we also have ad hoc reporting, which we'll see. All right, so how do we do a report? Well, let's actually go into the product. So we're going to switch over to Solver. I can find it here. Oh, sorry, I got to alt tab around again. There we go. Okay, so here we are in Solver. So let's give a quick overview of what you have, and then we'll get into the reporting. This is the home page. So when you log into Solver, if you have any notifications, such as they have a planned update coming this weekend, that will show up here, so you know that there's something coming. Also, anything that you've worked on recently is going to show up here, so you don't have to go hunt and peck for it. And then if you have any favorite reports, you can come over to favorites and you can get them from here. The idea is, just like any homepage, is to make it a central place to get where you need to be and not have to go search and do things like that. Okay. All right. Now, I will mention up here, you'll see we have the help button. And the nice thing here is you'll see the Solver Academy. So Solver comes with an online training academy. Everybody that's a user gets the ability to use Solver Academy. And you also see help and documentation. And coming this weekend, coming to tomorrow night, in fact, in their latest update, they're going to be introducing Copilot for Solver, or Solver Copilot, which is going to be their first iteration of using artificial intelligence. And the idea is you can search for, like, how do I create a planning template or a report? And it's going to search the various resources they have and then start providing you answers. And then you can have an interactive chat with that AI. Okay, so step one for AI for Solver is helping you find information in the system. Okay, and then there's also a community and a support website where you can go pose questions to Solver support or to fellow users. Okay, so let's go to report templates over here. So this is our reporting area. And we're going to go to report templates. Now, these items that you see here are categories. Think of these as like Windows folders where you store the reports that you want to share with other people. I'm going to go to financial reports, and I'm going to open up this guy right here. All right. So what you see, let's make it bigger so you can actually read it. Here you have an example of what Excel can do for you. Okay, so you've got some graphics, and then you've got your report. Now, in some reporting tools, to build a report, you have to go row by row, and you have to define what you want to show on every single row. Okay, but I'm going to show you in the Report Designer that you don't have to do it that way. And that's using functionality called expanding rows and expanding columns. So when you build reports in Solver, you don't want to have to hard code things. Like, you don't want to say this row is only for 410, this row is only for 420. You want to make it dynamic, just like a pivot table. And so as you add data, let's say you add new accounts, you add new companies, you add new departments, you want all that data to show up dynamically so you don't have to go maintain a bunch of templates. So when we go into the Report Designer in a moment, you're going to see that there's only one row for revenue instead of 5 rows. And then as we get into our expenses, you can see that we've got some outlining that's just native Excel, but you notice that we have a bunch of detail, and then we have a total, and then more detail, and then another total. So what you're going to see in Report Designer is you're going to have 2 rows, and we're going to refer to those as groupings. So we're going to have group 1, which is the totals: travel and entertainment, professional fees, salaries and benefits, and so on. Those are our larger groups. And within that group, we're going to have our detail, and that's going to be this information here. Okay? So you're going to have 2 rows of expenses in our report design rather than 40 rows, which you can see here, starting at row 42 and going down to row 90. Okay, so that's about what, 42, whatever 90 minus 42 is, about close to 50, if my math is right. Okay, now within this, I can right click as a user and get detail. The drill down is built in automatically, so a user can drill down to the detail. You can also build your own drill to definitions, which is what this is right here. So you can build as many custom drill twos as you want that shows the data that you want to show the users. Okay. You can also build drill downs to other data in the system. For example, maybe I have some sales data and I want people to be able to drill back into the sales activity related to this account. So they can see sales invoices and salespeople and what they sold and all that good stuff. Okay. You can also export this to Excel, and it's going to look just like it does on the page here because it was created in Excel. You can also export it to PDF. And if you want to distribute reports to users via email, you can also distribute Excel files and PDF files to those users. So you may have, for example, some executives who are not going to log into a system. They just want the results sent to them. So you can set up a publisher job to distribute those reports to them automatically. Okay, so let's go ahead and look in Report Designer at how this report is built. So we're going to go to Edit in Report Designer, and it's going to open it up in Excel. And then you're going to see a few things here. We'll let it build for a second. So you can see our charts. And over here, we have our Report Designer pane, which is going to give us access to the data in the data warehouse. Let's make that full screen. And then we have this thing here called Layout Editor. And Layout Editor is used to define what our filters are and what our groupings are for each row or column. All right, so remember we said we had one revenue row in our design, and that's what we have here instead of 5 that are displaying. So how do we get 5 rows out of one row in our design? Well, if we highlight row 25, you can see that we have a filter. And don't worry about the name roll up level 1. That's just this data. In your data, it could be category or something else. But what we have is a filter. So when we talk about adding more data like new accounts, for example, as long as you classify it correctly in the back end, it's going to show up automatically in the report if you're using filters like that. And then how do I make it turn from 1 row into 5 rows? Well, if I go to my grouping tab, it's grouping my data for every account that it finds that meets that filter. So it says, okay, I want only revenue accounts. Perfect. How do you want to display them? I want to display them for each individual account number that I find. And then over here, I have a checkbox called expanding. So it's expanding my data by account number for every account that is revenue. Okay. If we come down to our expenses, remember we had from row 42 to row 90. And so here, you'll see we have 2 rows. So how do we expand those? Well, remember I said earlier we have groupings. We have 2 groups. We have our outer group, which is saying, just give me all my expenses. Okay, very simple. But I want to group that data by that roll-up level or that category. Then within that, I want to show the detail, which is this guy right here. So I have by every individual account. So what it's going to do, this grouping here is going to get all my expenses, and it's going to group them by category. This group here is going to be inside that, and it's only going to show accounts for each category that is displayed. But now, instead of creating a 48-row design, I've created a 2-row design that will automatically expand into those items. Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about this over here. These are all the modules that have been created in the data warehouse. So you can create up to, I think, 500 modules in the Solver data warehouse. So you really should not run out of modules. Okay. And within each module, you have these items. And you'll notice these items here, you may be familiar with dimensions, depending on what accounting system you use. But if you've never heard that word dimension, that's okay. Just think about these as like master tables or setup tables. So we have our account table, our category table, and other things. And these just provide more information about that data. Okay. So in your accounting system, you probably go to a screen, an account maintenance window, and you add information about each account. If I go to my accounts, there I have it. I have account description, account type, account category, and some other items. Okay, so these are all of the different types of data that have been uploaded into the Solver data warehouse. Okay, and then basically when you create a report, all you're doing is you're dragging from here to here. So if I drag the count over like that, it's going to create a selection group, and you can see it's expanding already. It says, well, what accounts do I want? Well, I don't want to do it by account number. I want to do it by category. But I could come over here and say where the account is in a range of accounts or starts with a certain account number, like a 4 for revenue accounts. Well, let's go ahead and delete that. And let's come over to our account category and let's pull in revenue like that. And then if I want my description, I just pull that in right there. And then I want my amount. So I'm going to pull in my amount right there. Okay. Now I need to be able to format it. So I want this to be formatted a certain way. So I can go to my number formatting. All right. Now, what data do I want? Well, I only want actual data. So I'm going to create what's called a sheet filter. We're going to bring in scenario. And I'm just going to hard code it as actual. But I could also leave it open as an option for a user to pick. And what periods do I want? Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come over to this pre-built list of period functions. So you can see we got a lot of common things that people like to use. 12 months rolling, 3 months rolling. Down at the bottom, we have year to date. Okay, so let's do a 12-month rolling. We'll just drop that right there. Okay, so we talked about expanding. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell it I want to expand that column, and I want a header to show the month name. So I'm going to come over here to my periods, and I'm going to pull in my month right there. All right, so what that's going to do is it's going to create 12 rows or 12 columns, and it's going to create 5 rows. And if I want a total, I can just come over here and create a sum like that. Okay, so now when I run it, it's going to give me a rolling 12 months. And there it is. So here we have our rows and we have our 12 months. So just like that, we created a report. We need to flip the sign on our revenue so it shows up as a positive number. But other than that, everything else is just formatting or adding more filters if you need. Okay. So that's how you build a report pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and close that. We're not going to save it. Okay. So let's go back here to our PowerPoint real quick. So how do you create a report? You start a new report from the toolbar. You create it, you test it, you publish it so other people can use it, and then you put that template into a category that you share with your users. Okay. And so here's that report. Here's another report that similar to the one we just saw, but a little bit different. Okay, these are just some examples. So if we look here, this is the design, and this is the output. Okay. All right, so if you download this presentation, you'll be able to look at all those items. But what we want to do is we're going to get through to the end. And let's look at another polling question, and then we will look at ad hoc reporting, and then we'll talk about planning. So how are you creating budgets and forecasts? I have a feeling I know which one is going to garner the most answers, but let's see what you guys answer here. All right, and while we're waiting, we do have a question. So we have, do you have to be a full user to see what he is showing? So to be able to create a report or to run a template, you have to be a full user. If you want to be a recipient of a report to see the results, you only need to be a viewer. So I'll show you that in just a second. And let's like most people are using Excel. Okay. All right. So let's hop over back to Solver. And so let's just be clear about the type of licenses. So right here, to be able to go into report templates, you need to be a user, okay, a full user. Now we can restrict what you can do as a user, but you have to be a user to see the categories, to see the templates, and be able to run the templates yourself. If you are a viewer, then if we go to Report Archive, a viewer can come here and view the results that people have shared. So if I come over here and open up this report, this is a report viewer. Now, anybody that's a user also has this, but viewers only have this, okay? Now, what you can do here is I can still drill down. I can come over here, I can export my data, okay? And then when you're done, just go back to Report Archive, and there it is. So that's a viewer. A viewer can also be a recipient on a publisher job. So if I want to send out my report results to people by email, I can create a publisher job to do that. And then anybody that is a viewer or a user can be a recipient of those jobs. Okay. Hopefully that answered that question. If you have any more, though, by all means ask. One other thing I'm going to show you here in reporting is ad hoc reporting. So a lot of times you have people who, one, they don't need to create a template. They don't know how to create a template, but they still need data that's not already planned in a template. So how do we give people the ability to do that? Well, we have ad hoc reporting. Anybody that is a full user, not a viewer, but a user, has this functionality. So I'm going to just open up this guy right here. Actually, this one here. All right. Excuse me. So what you have is your canvas, you have filters, and you have fields. So all you do as a user is you select the fields, you select the filters, and then you view the data. Okay. So let's go take a look at, we'll just walk through one real quick. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pick sales, or I'm sorry, not sales, revenue. Okay. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pick product and customer and amount. Okay. Now, I also want to see this data a certain way, but I'm going to get rid of the period just to not worry about demo data, but I could come over here and pick different periods to see. But let's go ahead and delete that for now, make it easier. So there's my data. Now I might say, well, I don't really want to see the customer number or customer code or the product code. I need to see the names. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go customer description, turn that off. Product description, turn that off, refresh, and there's my data. Now I can move things around. I can also pivot this data. So if I hit pivot, now I can see my data is sorted by customer and it's showing by product. I could also pivot it the other way. I could say, show product description first. Let's go pivot it. And now we have our products pivoted by customer. Okay, and you can save these, you can export these to a spreadsheet. And if you need more detail, you just start clicking on other fields to add it to your report. Okay, so that's ad hoc reporting. All right, so let's talk about planning. Planning templates are built the same way you build report templates. The only difference between a planning template and a report template is you have to tell it how to save the data, which is pretty straightforward once we do it, and you can enter data. So think of budget data, think of forecasts. You could also have allocations. You could have elimination entries. You can have really any kind of data that you want to maintain in the system. Okay. So we come over here, let's say to my department budgets. You can see we have a few like personnel, travel, other expenses. So if we come over to this personnel template, make it full screen, then you can see the yellows are for data entry and the blue cannot be changed. But the idea here is, let's say I'm using Paycom as my payroll provider. I would take my Paycom data, I would upload it into Solver, and then I can then have my individual departments or locations or companies come in and start adding to be hireds. If I have new people that are coming, I can come over here, I can change, when somebody is going to end their career, okay? And of course, this is a sample template. You may want to expand this and then have more columns, more assumptions, things like that. But as I scroll to the right, you can see all these calculations, and these are just pure Excel formulas that you're seeing over on the right, okay? So the idea is all that data that you see up here is going to be saved in a payroll module or personnel module. Then down below, we have our general ledger impact of that data. So as I add people, as I change pay rates, I would see the effect on my general ledger. And then when I save my template, it's going to save the payroll data in the payroll module and the GL effect in the GL module. Okay. Then if I come over here to, let's say, this guy, this would be all those other expenses. And if I look at one like here, like other supplies, there are different ways. I could just key it in like that. I can also go to line item details and then put in my data there. So let's say I put, let me scroll down a little bit. Let's say for other supplies, I have, what could I have? I'll say mouse and $500. It's a very nice mouse. And then mouse pad. Okay, like that. And then as I keep putting in my line items, they're going to show up here and they're going to show up right here. There's that 550 right there. And then I can also put in comments about those items. And then once I do that, you can see the comments pop up in a comment window. And so the idea is I can have users just keying in data in this detail window for each item, okay? Or again, I could have users just key in data manually, okay? I can also do spreading. So if I want to just say, hey, take 1,200 divided by 12. Or if I have seasonality and maybe some months get a bigger portion, you can add seasonality. Let's take a look at a totally different kind. Let's go to our modeling. Okay, let's look at this guy. So what you have here is kind of a what if. So it says, all right, well, how much money do I want to make? Well, I want to make $1.2 million. So now what it's doing is it's calculating how much I need to get 1.2. And then maybe I might say, you know what, for revenue, I think we're going to do better. I'm going to do 25%. And for services, we'll go up to 15%. So you can do it at a larger level. You can do it at a line item level. And then you're done. The idea behind this template is just to help you calculate data based on a what if, okay? We have some clients, they'll take data from one template and then they will then have another template where they can just go in and tweak the numbers individually. Okay, nothing wrong with that. Okay, but this will get you started. And then Solver does have workflow. So if you want to be able to have assignments for users, then we can do that. So we go to assignments. These are my assignments. So I'm going to go to single assignments and I'm going to go to this simple monthly budget. Okay, so very simple, not particularly aesthetically pleasing, But here's our report or template. And then as I key in data like that, notice that save data becomes available. So now I can hit save data and then see that data saved in the data warehouse. If I am using workflows, let's leave that. I can also, instead of doing, like I just showed you, we can also do assignments. So if I come into personnel, notice we have this complete assignment option at the top. And what that does is it tells the person next in line, the approver or the reviewer, that Charles has completed his assignment. So what that allows Charles to do, what that allows Charles's supervisor to do or approver is see who has started their budgets, who is in progress, and who has completed. So you don't have to keep asking people what their status is. You can just go in here as a report approver or a budget approver and see the status of each person and what they've done yet. Okay? All right. Now, we talked about Power BI. So I'm going to go ahead and show you over here. This is just a solver showcase. And if we look here, we've got various dashboards. So let's come over here and let's pick a particular area. Let's do higher education because I mentioned Ole Miss is here. So if I click on this guy right here, here we have an example of a Power BI report that's based on the solver data warehouse. Okay. And again, if you go into Power BI, if you have Power BI loaded today, you can go to get data and you can search for solver, and then you're going to see solver is one of the connectors that you can choose. Okay. And then you can go into Power BI and build those. Now, for those of you who are technical, solver is using what we call a star schema, which means that you have a central table of facts, like the activity from GL, the activity from sales. And then you have some surrounding items, which are your master tables, like your account master, your department master, your period table, your calendar table, like that. So you have that central thing like a sun, and then surrounding it are the planets. Okay, and then you build these reports in Power BI against that data. But again, solver is using a star schema, and it's based on a Microsoft Azure SQL database. Okay, so we go back over here and go to our data warehouse. These items are those fact tables, and these items in blue are those dimensions. Okay, so sun and planets right here. So we have a lot of planets, especially in this guy right here. All right. And so you build your data warehouse, and that's where we can help you, of course. We help you build the integrations to pull that data in, and then you can use it for reporting and planning. Okay, so we have a question here. Does solver, I just got the same question yesterday. Does solver also support a snowflake? So no, solver is structured as a star schema. So I know some of you like to use snowflake schemas. And for those who don't know the difference between a star and a snowflake at a database level, a star is a very simple structure, whereas a snowflake gives you more types of tables. So you can have a table connected to one table, connected to another table. Okay. But in a star schema, which is what solver uses, that's what we do. All right, great question. Let's see. All right, I think that is all the questions so far. So let's take another look here. So if we go back to reporting, a lot of you are looking for that. If we look over here, I'm going to show you one other item because we talked about adding companies. So let's come over here. We're going to just search for the word tree. So a lot of people like to be able to produce reports with a separate page per company, right? You may do it in Excel today, where you have a hard-coded page that pulls out company 1 or company 2 or department 1 or department 2. But what you'll notice here is we have a page for every part of our organization. And in this case, we're using what's called a tree to do that. If I hit the drop down, you can see that we're using this geographical tree. It's got a top level, it's got 2 regions, and then it's got individual items within them. Okay? So what we can do is when we run this report is automatically creating a page per item in my tree. Okay? And that's another example of that dynamic expansion. We call that sheet per value in Solver. Okay? This consolidated tree node is just going to be a summary of all the items below it. So if I come over here and do a right click and drill down on my DL, it would show me the data. You can see I've got data from multiple entities right there. Okay. But if I go to, let's say, corporate, and let's expand this one, and drill down again, you can see now this is just coming from one entity. Okay. So as you go down the tree in detail in lower levels, as you drill down, you're only going to see the data for that item. Now, from a security standpoint, if I only had access to corporate EMEA, then even though you are producing the entire report, I would only have access to the data in that. So you don't have to build separate reports as long as you set up the security to provide data permissions, okay? And that makes things a lot easier. And maybe even there's some accounts in a report you could even hide from certain people. Maybe you want to hide payroll reports from people or payroll data from people so they can't see how much people are making. You can do that with the security. Okay. All right. So let's see if we have any other questions here. We do have a tree. So Gina says, trees are, this is a question, are trees the same as expanding tabs? So no, they are not technically the same. A tree is generally used to give you expanding tabs, but you don't have to use a tree to do that. Trees are good if you want to have multiple layers where you have roll-ups. But if you just say, hey, I've got 20 departments and I want to get a sheet for every single department, I don't necessarily have to have a tree to do that. Okay. But if I want to group my departments into different divisions, for example, and be able to pick division 1 or division 2, then that's where a tree comes in handy. Okay, good question. All right, well, I think we've reached the end of the questions, and I could, of course, go on. If you have any questions, please find me on LinkedIn, send me a message through Forvis Mazars, and happy to answer any questions. Let's go back to our presentation. Make sure we have one more polling question. And again, we have more examples. And here is our last polling question. So please feel free to answer this question, yes or no. I'm not going to get notified immediately, but after the webinar, then we'll get a message that says, hey, so-and-so wants to be contacted. So if you say yes, then Charles Allen is probably going to contact you afterwards, all right? Also, if you can, fill out our survey, let us know what you thought of the webinar so that we can either make sure that the next one is better for you and we cover the topics that you want to see.
Charles, that was extremely helpful. So yes, please let us know if you would like to further discuss reporting and planning solutions. As Charles mentioned, please reach out to Business Technology Services at Forvis Mazar. And also, we have a link. I see a few of you are on GP. And with Microsoft's latest announcement, we hope you can join us on November 12th, where we're expanding that conversation of your GP roadmap. And so this one will take a look at exploring Business Central. So that is a cloud-based option. And so is Dynamics 365 Finance. Just have to find the right fit for your organization. So thank you, Charles. Thank you to our audience, and we hope you can join us again for a future webinar.